Hi everyone, as promised, today I'm going to cover the second part of my video on progressivism, and more specifically, Christian progressivism, and the idea that leads one from believing in God and Jesus' resurrection to rejecting all three eventually. And so you can see here from the visual that I made in the last one exactly how I feel that progression goes. First, you start denying God's omniscience, omnipotence, sovereignty. Then it leads you to start denying biblical authority. And then you eventually deny Jesus' resurrection. To some, that ends up leading to atheism. So the big question that I'm going to address in this video is going to focus on a conversation that was had between Pinecreek Doug and Nathan Orman initially, which talked about the whether or not progressivism leads to atheism. And while I'm on my way there, I want to say hi to Josh. Great to see you, Josh. And so that is my posit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a clip from a video between Pinecreek Doug and Nathan Orman was initially on it, but then eventually Pinecreek just ran the clip with him and Randal Rauser. And so, excuse me, I'm going to show you that clip. And then we're going to discuss exactly what's going on here. And so let me first stop sharing my screen. I'm going to share this other screen. Here we go. And say hi to people who are in the chat. Just wonderful to see you. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming by. I always enjoy seeing people. Here's Pinecreek. Excuse me. So I have the original video linked in the description, so hopefully you can see that. So here you see in the top left, just to let you know, that's Dr. Randal Rauser. He's been on my channel a couple of times. Randal is a very progressive Christian. He here is going to question Luke 2 and the story that we're told about Jesus in the temple as a 12-year-old. And I'm going to give you some information about that I think is quite relevant after we first hear his initial thoughts. And of course, Pinecreek is loving this because Pinecreek is an atheist. There he is on the right, and he does not accept that Jesus resurrected. And so here we go.
When my daughter was about 3 or 4 years old, we were visiting family in Colorado.
Oh, he's going to give a similar example what I just gave.
And she got frustrated with me at one point and she stormed off. And then we went on and we were doing our thing. And then we called out for her probably half an hour later and couldn't hear from her. She didn't respond. I shouted again, like I shouted. And then I screamed at the top of my lungs, calling out for my daughter, and there was no response, just silence in the house. In a moment of panic, we suddenly thought maybe she left the house and she walked away. She ran away from home, as it were. And so we went out and looked in the neighborhood and couldn't find her anywhere. Got back, and by this time I am in maximal panic mode. And we called the police department in Fort Collins in Colorado, and they came out to look for my daughter who was missing. I couldn't process, I couldn't put thoughts together. This is the way that my mind was working in that moment.
Okay, so we can see Randal's frustration. Of course, we can empathize with Randal for, excuse me, having gone through that. That's obviously a less than ideal situation, to say the very least. And so here's what we're going to talk about, exactly what Jesus did in the temple and what happened and what the context is behind it that could explain this whole situation. Now, unlike Randal, Jesus's parents gave birth to a child who is divine, okay, fully divine. And that was Jesus's mother and, of course, biological father, which is God, our Father in heaven. And so that's one big differentiator. Did they know he was divine? Well, yes, they did. They were informed that, of course, by the angel Gabriel, who told both of them that the child inside Mother Mary, who was conceived without being impregnated by Joseph, that child was divine. So the parents were well aware that Jesus was divine. Does that mean that as parents and you have a 12-year-old that you're not still going to be worried? Well, sure. But you also know that in Jesus's royal divine position, this is an entirely different thing. And so what did Jesus say to them? Let's look at this. Now his parents, and I'm reading from Luke 2. Now, and I want to say hi to Taking Back Eden and Jesse Camping. Great to see you guys. So wonderful. Here's what it says. The boy Jesus in the temple. Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went according to custom. Okay, so no Jesus's age there. That is the same age where many boys in the Jewish faith go through the bar mitzvah. Now, the bar mitzvah was not around in Jesus's time. It wasn't invented until centuries later, and it wasn't brought to the condition that it is today until a long time later, starting around medieval times. However, the idea that Jesus was sort of coming out as a man recognized at that age is quite likely. It's quite likely that the age of either 12 or 13, which is when kids have their bar mitzvahs, it's very likely that at the age of 12, there was something very special of this time for Jesus being a Jewish boy, especially raised by Orthodox parents. It makes it quite clear in different passages that his parents were always following the Jewish laws and customs. And when the feast was ended, as they were returning, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. His parents did not know it, but supposing him to be in the group, they went a day's journey. But then they began to search for him among their relatives and acquaintances. And when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem, searching for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. Okay, let's make another note of this. The idea with the bar mitzvah, it's it's the idea of the son of commandment. And this is the very similar idea that could have been among the ancient Jewish customs. And the idea was you would go into the temple for these traditions when you're coming out as a man, and that was recognized again around 12 and 13. You would go into the temple and you would be shown the scriptures. You were also sometimes, if we did go with the bar mitzvah, you're also reading the scriptures. Around the age of 4, you'd been given the first scriptures. You're taught the language at that time. It's very important as a Jewish person that you understand the Hebrew customs and the Hebrew language. Also very important that you can understand the text. Now, it's likely during Jesus's time, they were reading in Aramaic, very likely, because that was the very common language. It could be likely also that they were reading in Greek. We see evidence, in fact, of the Septuagint sprinkled throughout the New Testament. But anyway, whatever it is, Jesus was showing everybody what he knew, and it was quite amazing because, of course, his age. He was just coming into being recognized in the Jewish faith for his departure from his parents and that. And so here's what the parents said. And when his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us so? Behold, your father and I have been searching for you in great distress." And he said to them, "Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house?" And so notice this. Did you not know that I must be in my father's house? Look at the specificity of that. I must be in my father's house. And so Jesus was again letting them know. Now, let's recall something. Jesus did not perform any miracles as a child. In fact, one of the ways that we can distinguish some of the lies and some of the Gnostic later texts were some of them claim that Jesus had been performing miracles as a child. But we know from the Gospels that his first miracle was at the wedding at Cana. Now, the issue is, how did his parents deal with the fact that he is also divine? I think a lot of times the parents didn't realize exactly what it meant to be the parents of divinity. I don't think that they fully were able to grasp that, just as we wouldn't be able to fully grasp that today. It's very difficult to try to figure out what exactly that means. And so we see time and again where the parents were questioning Jesus. So first we see it when Joseph was still alive, both parents questioning Jesus, both parents worried about Jesus, both parents really not taking fully into account the fact that he was divine and they did not need to worry about Jesus. And also the fact that if you're looking for a divine son of the Most High, it would make a lot of sense to look for him in the house of the Lord. So Jesus was sort of admonishing them, letting them know that, yes, you should have looked for me in the house of the Lord. That's where you're going to find me. And so the other thing that we have is the parents. Later on, Mary, Mother Mary, and the brothers tried to stop Jesus' ministry. They showed up and they questioned exactly what he was doing. Now, they didn't fully understand what it meant to be, again, the parents of divinity. Some Jewish people in ancient times were expecting a ruler to be sort of a political ruler who is going to come in, tear down the Roman government, and put his own throne there. Some Jewish people were expecting that. However, some of the wiser Jewish people had looked into the text in the Old Testament and realized there were two types of Messiah. There was the one from Zechariah 9:9, of course, the seer king comes to you lowly and riding on a donkey. And then there was the one on Daniel 7, where it speaks of Jesus coming in the clouds of heaven, and Psalm 110, where he's sitting at the right hand of the mighty one. So we have two distinct types of Messiah. Now, did the Jewish people realize that? Sure. We see that in Sanhedrin 98. So you can go verify that right now. The Jewish people realized there were two types of Messiah, and they said that if they were good, the Messiah would come in glory right away. And if they were not good, they would receive the one on the donkey. And of course, that was the form that Jesus came. And so that is what happened. And so again, that's written. You can go find it yourself. It's right in the Sanhedrin 98. And we see that. So we also see what's going on here with Randal and Pinecreek, again, questioning Jesus, questioning the stories. This goes back to what happens when you're a progressive Christian. A lot of times you value yourself sort of as a god over the other gods. Now, there's a movement by a bunch of progressive Christians and people like Kenneth Copeland and others who have gone to the point where they think of themselves as gods. And that's pretty crazy, where they think of themselves as gods. And it brings us to something really important with the serpent and the very first question that was asked in the book of Genesis. And so if we go to Genesis 3, which I'm going to turn to right now, 3 ESV. All right, let's take a look at that. It goes back to this idea of when you think of yourself as a god. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord had made. He said to the woman, "Did God actually say, 'You shall not eat of any tree in the garden'?" And the woman said, "Serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, 'You shall not eat of the fruit of the tree in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die.' But the serpent said to the woman, 'You will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.'" You see, man's desire to be like God or to be divine as God is something that we see in society today, and goes all the way back to the beginning of people. And that's the desire that a lot of progressive Christians have. They think of themselves as sort of the God. They put God into a manly position. And that's exactly what, unfortunately, what Randal Rauser, and I like Randal Rauser. I think he's a great guy. I just disagree with him on this stuff. But what he's doing here is by giving us the story of his daughter and his, when he is, of course, a father, he's putting God and Jesus, he's putting him into the same context of his own story. Again, now you're bringing God down from heaven, putting him into a manly position, and not giving God the power, the authority, the sovereignty, and the divinity that is due him. And so that is the problem. And that's the issue that we see. And so, yeah, thank you. Taking Back Eden says Satan undermines the foundations of the Bible, creation. Now people believe evolution, rules. People don't know the 10 Commandments, judgment. People don't think they'll be judged. Good news. Yes, I do agree. I think that the whole issue with evolution, and I don't really get into that because I'm not a scientist. I have never really studied evolution in any sort of depth. And so I'm not going to be somebody who's going to make my claims about evolution. I do note, though, that people like Dr. James Tour have a lot to say about our biochemistry and other related events leading to our origins. And evolution, of course, doesn't explain our origins. So the whole issue of even backing or talking about evolution and thinking that somehow mitigates the need for a divine origin is rather silly. Even Darwin knew the implications of the change. So Darwin explains change of some species, and but he doesn't fully explain our origins. Our origins are quite well explained in the book of Genesis. So yeah, so thank you also, Jesse Camping, Morlowin. I don't see Morlowin here, so let's see where Morlowin is. Jesse Camping, Taking Back Eden. So, okay. So that was just my little quick clip today. I was just going to do a quickie, and I wanted to show it to you. So hope you guys have a great day today. Whether you eat jink or whatever you do, do it all in the glory of God. Thank you.